Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Wednesday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We are going to continue our coverage of UFC 304, looking at some of the non-main event fighters that you should pay attention to coming up on this card. So again, full disclosure, I am recording this on Friday, July 19th. I am off on vacation right now, and so that is what is happening. So if a couple of these have changed in that time, I apologize, but hopefully the analysis is still good. So that is what's going on. Let's get into some fight talk. All right, UFC 304 going down this weekend out in London. We, on Monday, looked at the big storylines going into the main events. Now let's look at some of the non-main event fights and fighters to watch. And we will start with Bobby Green against Paddy Pimblett in the lightweight division. Paddy had a lot of momentum, but it does feel like that has slowed a little bit. He does get a big win over Tony Ferguson. That doesn't mean what it used to. Now he's facing a fan favorite fighter and someone who will force him to be on his toes. Like there was a lot of buzz coming around this guy, and now it does feel like that has cooled off a little bit. And it feels like there was a lot of fighters who are like, hey, maybe this guy isn't as good as we thought he was. I'm going to try to jump the line a little bit and get in there with this dude so that maybe I can take advantage of the bigger name than the actual talent. He is still a very, very talented fighter. Don't hear what I'm not saying. He is really, really good still, but it does feel like that momentum has slowed a little bit here as of late. And so I'll be interested to see if he can kind of build that momentum back up. There's a lot of pressure on Paddy Pimblett here. UK fighter fighting in the UK. He was a very well hyped up prospect, and this is a dangerous fighter that can potentially make you a highlight reel. And so it makes this a really, really fascinating fight for me. Again, I think Paddy Pimblett has a bright, bright future ahead of him in this sport. I don't know how much of it is in the immediate. I do think overall he is a better fighter than Bobby Green, but Bobby Green has a certain skill set that can make you look really, really bad very, very quickly. And for Bobby Green, this miraculous last chapter of his career just continues. There absolutely is a ceiling to what Bobby Green can do. We saw that in the fight against Turner. We saw that against Dober. We saw that against Islam Makhachev. There's a ceiling that this guy can get to, but he has turned himself into a must-see fan favorite draw. His exciting style, the way he goes about just everything inside that cage and on fight week, makes him someone that the people really do get behind and really do get excited for. And so for that, he's become incredibly valuable to the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Like you look at what he can do, whether it is anywhere fighting on the card, right? Like if you want to put him on the prelims against Jim Miller, then by all means go for it. You want him to wrap up the prelims on ESPN before we go to pay-per-view, dude can do that. You want him on the pay-per-view, all action, he can do that. You need him as a main eventer on a fight night card, he can do that. There is a lot that Bobby Green can do that makes it really, really exciting. And makes him someone that, again, is very versatile for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. One thing you know is that he is going to bring the action. And we said yesterday, or on Monday, like these are the hometown guys, Leon Edwards and Tom Aspinall. But they're... I guess Edwards is a household name. Aspinall maybe isn't yet, but people know Bobby Green, and they know, like, okay, this guy's fighting third from the top. There's going to be action. There's going to be violence. It's going to be a whole lot of fun, and this is a guy that we can absolutely get excited about. And he's a fantastic test for an up-and-coming prospect, and he probably doesn't view himself that way, like, oh, yeah, I'm a gatekeeper to the stars. But he is someone that if you are worthy of the hype that, quite frankly, Paddy Pimblett got, you can get past Bobby Green. That is a very valuable part of the UFC roster, and I think the UFC is using him in a really, really good way. This is going to be a great test for Paddy Pimblett, and quite frankly, I don't really know how this fight really all shakes out coming up on Saturday. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. Another name that I'm interested in is Manel Kape. There just always seems to be something going on with him. And knowing that I'm pre-recording these, this was the one that I was the most concerned about just throwing up there. But I do think that This is an interesting fighter, but there's always something, right? Like random injury pullouts, missing weight. All these reasons have kept him out of the cage since September of 2023. I still think there is a very talented fighter there. He's won 4 in a row, 2 by knockout, 2 by decision. I hope he gets to the level that he should. He's 30 years old now. It feels like it's time to get going for this guy. And again, it hasn't necessarily all been his fault. There has been a lot that has been his fault, quite frankly. But this is a fighter who I think still has a great bit of potential, even at 30 years old, to really do something here in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. But it's gotta get going now, and we'll see if it can get going now here coming up this weekend. And the last bout that we're going to focus on here today is Arnold Allen against Giga Chikadze. Allen needs to get back on track. He's another guy who is local on this card. It felt like he would be, by the time this card came around, he would be getting kind of a bigger national spotlight. That hasn't necessarily been the case. It's back-to-back losses against Max Holloway and Movsar Evloev that have knocked him kind of down a peg. He does have some really impressive wins before that, though, against Kattar, Hooker, Usuf, and a number of others. The natural progression, maybe not Max Holloway, but Evloev, that was kind of a natural progression. And the fact that he lost that one, I think, has paused a few things. And so that has, again, made him a bit of a fashionable call-out for a lot of people because there is a lot of hype around this particular fighter. I still think there is a very, very good fighter in there, and there is a lot that you can get excited about. He has been a trendy name to throw out in challenges and to try to take advantage of this potentially on the way down. This is a huge fight for him. He, I think, needs to get back on track in this big way. There's no shame losing to Holloway, not a ton in losing to Evloev, and not that there's a ton losing to Chikadze, but you build them all up, and it starts to feel like you just get further and further and further away from that championship opportunity. And again, Chikadze is nothing to scoff at. He doesn't have the name value of some other fighters, but I do think that there is still a dangerous fighter in there. He loses to Calvin Kattar. That ends a 9-fight winning streak. He bounces back against Alex Caceres. He can still bring it, and he's going to be a really, really tough fight for what Allen is going through right now. And I think this is a very good litmus test. Again, I don't want to call Chikadze a gatekeeper by any stretch of the imagination, but I think whoever comes out of this, that they're not, okay, number one contender, here we go. But they're a fight away from being a fight away from being a fight away. You know, like they are continuing up the ladder in a real exciting way. And I think the loser does kind of go down a notch, that it's going to be really difficult for them to work up. Not impossible. And I think certainly not in Allen's case. But I do think that there is quite a bit on the line for a couple of talented fighters here this weekend. A couple other fight announcements before we go today. Another quick one, I know. But the UFC has named Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak number 2 as a main event. I saw someone on X, and I apologize, I missed who it was, but they said some cards have main events and some cards have fights that just go last. And this feels certainly like one of those fights that just goes last. And one of those ones, you know what? The loser of this fight or the winner of this fight, whatever, put him against Alex Pereira, like we talked about on Friday. This is a guy who is daring to be great, wants to move up to heavyweight, so by God, let him. I think that we should give him that opportunity against one of these guys. In terms of what's next after UFC 304, you have the UFC on ABC from Abu Dhabi on August 3rd. Corey Sandhagen in the main event against Umar Nurmagomedov. You have Vicente Luque against Nick Diaz. Marlon Vera against Davison Figueiredo. Tony Ferguson in action against Michael Chiesa. And Mackenzie Dern against Lupi Godinez. So overall, like for a fight card, this is a really, really good fight card and a really stacked one that they are bringing to Abu Dhabi, as obviously they continue to work out there and try to bring a lot more to fans in that neck of the woods. And I think Sandhagen against Nurmagomedov is a really interesting fight. I love that Vicente Luque is getting this big spotlight of a fight against Nick Diaz. Vera against Figueiredo is just going to be an all-action type of a brawl. And then pay-per-view, the next one, is Dricus du Plessis against Israel Adesanya in Australia. A lot going on around that fight, and it should be a really interesting one. All right, that's going to do it for this show. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Remember to subscribe wherever you're taking this in. Like it if you're watching. Review it if you're listening. Follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein. Also, twitch.tv/PrimetimePK. And I will talk to you. The plan is to be live on Friday. So we'll do it live on Friday. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to all of you later.